we go. Hey, Chris, turn off the mute or turn it on or switch your status, whatever. Say hello. I'm expecting Antoine Garth to join us, who is my writing partner for 20 years. And he and I are a couple of adults who met, in our adult, finally our adult development, so to speak. I think I'm talking about insects too, but the idea is that he and I've had a long friendship, but he has Sagittarius, I think 27 degrees, and Mercury there. And I have Gemini rising 29 degrees. And so we're twins, we're astral twins. And we decided that we're going to tell about a dream he just had. And it was about twins. So a fascinating, astrology is not just about reading horoscopes. It's also about how you walk through life. So we're going to have a fun, interesting conversation. He and I always have these conversations I wish I had had an audience for because they're so fascinating.
That's sometimes where voice memos come in well, right?
Well, if I were only smart enough, and I'm getting smarter, but not fast enough. Let's see here. I'm going to, let's see. I thought I had Chris Roberts was in, but I don't see him anymore.
I see him. He's there, and participants.
Okay, I don't see the participant screen for some reason. Let me see where I am. Anyway, I'm just going to fly with it and not worry about too much. I'll record and share the video later. I'm also wanting everyone to know, I guess I should wait until more people come on, but I'm doing this because we're about to open our school, so to speak. It's not really, obviously, any kind of old school, but I'm opening my school, my astrology school, and all in support of a book that he and I wrote 15 years ago or so, which was called The Astrology of Fortune. And nobody can use it until they have certain skills available to them to begin using this amazing technique, which answers questions very solidly, questions that we all have, like when will I get married, or when will I have children, or am I going to become famous, and so on. Those questions are answered without any problem in a very solid ancient technique, which is, to me, what made astrology powerful. So I'm so disappointed throughout most of my career, which started in the 60s as an astrologer. And I mean, I was a young pup, obviously, but I became a part of the crowd that went into astrology back in the 60s. And I was disappointed because my predictions, while some of them worked, I couldn't reach those questions. I couldn't just unequivocally say, oh, you'll marry before you're 40. Don't worry, that kind of thing. I couldn't say that. It's hard to say because you have to have the right information to support it. Well, the technique of fortune actually supports that. But if you're not also well versed in astrology, then it's not a beginning course. Let's put it that way. Okay, 2 people entered. David in the meeting. Okay, it looks like there's several of us here. We have David and we have Layla. Thank you for joining. And I've been yakking away. I'm expecting to see Antoine Garth, my partner, join us in a few minutes. In the moment, I'm wanting to confess all and let you know that I have a big agenda. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm promoting my beginning astrology class. The class is mostly supported visually, if that makes any sense. And if you go to YouTube and look up my videos, my current videos, which are titled, "Why Are There Empty Houses?" It seemed a very common question. And so I treated it in 3 videos because it's too important to get this right. So if you have time, you might look up, "Why Are There Empty Houses?" and you'll be able to see what teaching technique I use and so on. I'm going to change the screen here. Now, Antoine and I are going to talk today about a little bit about Mercury retrograde. And one of the things that we would do in our beginning astrology class is mark in our ephemeris, which is distributed in the class, by the way. So that's not a problem. If you don't have an ephemeris, you will. But we're going to mark out the retrogrades for the year. And that's important. Those are important dates for your business as an astrologer. And another thing that Antoine and I decided on this morning is we're going to share with you a dream he just had. And it's all about twins, which of course is the motif behind the sign of Gemini. And one of the things about the sign of Gemini, it should be remembered always that it's Castor and Pollux, who are the 2 twins. And the story with them is that they become separated. And that's, of course, the story of Venus and Gemini last year as well. The separated twins. So we have a dream coming up that discusses that with such clarity. It's kind of amazing to see dreams and astrology come together in one sort of presentation. The idea too, let me just check. I wonder, I guess everybody's joining without any problem. I'm just wondering if I'm missing somebody. I'm waiting for Antoine, and since we just spoke. Oh, there he is. Okay, sorry. I didn't realize you were in waiting. And Antoine, you're on. Your speaker is your microphone is on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, well, hear you good. Awesome, love it. Well, thank you everyone. We've got maybe 7 or 8 people with us, and I'll read the list to you. We have Chris Roberts, David Britton. Oh, Davik. Thank you. I love having Davik on. My new nephew. Layla is with us. And let's see who else here. It won't let me look at the last name. I'm sorry. Anyway.
I see Stacy Flores.
Oh, you can see it?
Excuse me. Yes.
Okay, good. Right. Anyway, thank you, everyone. So, Antoine, I was notifying that you might tell us the dream that you recently had.
The dream.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, I will tell you the dream. So I have a tendency to pick apart people's dreams astrologically and tend to be pretty good at it, but I had a dream that stumped me recently. And so I just had it maybe 3 or 4 days ago. Davik and I have already talked about it. And I just told Claire-France about it this morning. I had a dream that I took my girlfriend to a reunion. And so that's at its basis, on its basis, that was the dream. I took a girlfriend to a reunion. Now, there's only one thing about that, is that I'm gay, and so I wouldn't necessarily have a girlfriend. So in the dream, I remember there was some conflict feeling kind of around that. And there were two people that kind of stuck out of all the people at the reunion, and both of them were people that I knew in another city where I had lived for a long time and where I was involved with music. And so one of them was a person that I had sung with at a festival, and the other one was a person that I had kind of had a romance with, and that also did a lot of partying and dancing and hanging out with. And so I realized at some point that this dream was kind of, well, the second part of the dream is involves Davik, but the main part of the dream is not, he wasn't in. So he was in the second part of the dream where I introduced him to someone else by the same name. But otherwise, this other part of the dream was what really kind of stumped me or got me thinking. And so I woke up wondering about this dream. Oh, and the last little point of this dream, and this is the point I was hoping Claire-France might help me with, was I introduced the wrong woman as my girlfriend. So I'm towards the end of this event, I've come up and everybody's shaking hands or saying, "Oh, hey, I haven't seen you in so long." And I remember hesitating before I actually say, "So this is my girlfriend." And then I look to my right, and the woman is the wrong woman. It's the wrong woman. It's not the woman I came with, who's supposed to be my girlfriend. It's a different woman. So then I'm like, "Oh, no, sorry, this is the wrong woman. That's my girlfriend over there." So that's kind of the last thing that I kind of remembered. Woke up very confused from the dream, very confused and very confounded by the dream. That's, I think, a good word, very confounded by the dream. The closer to it I was, the closer to waking, to the waking state. But as I got further and further away from the dream, I started kind of just trying to do the usual techniques that I do for dreams. One of them was creating associations for the symbolism. And so I thought, okay, what kind of association goes with having a girlfriend? And the first thing that came up was my other half. So the girlfriend was my other half. And now this is all happening. I'm doing all of this while I'm watching these Soul Train reruns. So on YouTube, there are all these, I know it's like, what does Soul Train have to do with it? But it does. So I'm watching these Soul Train reruns, and Soul Train is really familiar for having created the Soul Train line. And so there are all these reruns of Soul Train lines on YouTube. And I'm just kind of obsessed, with watching some of these Soul Train lines. So, other people watch, what is that, PewDiePie, whatever, but I watch Soul Train lines. So I'm watching these Soul Train lines, and different songs from the 70s are coming on, and one of the songs that is on is "I Feel Love." And so "I Feel Love" is playing. I'm kind of watching, and I'm also kind of in my head at the same time. And this is when all these revelations come up, and it's like, oh, dude, this was a Venus dream, right? Even Davik said, "Well, what did the woman look like?" And I was like, she was beautiful, tall, gorgeous, brunette, no older than 30, totally trophy wife, type of person. And so, so there was that. And I was like, wait a minute, you were there with Venus, and it was your girlfriend. It's like, that's Venus as hell. And then when I thought, I'm like, wait a second, you sang with one guy, that's Venus. You were in a romance with the other guy, that's Venus as hell. And then you all went dancing and hanging out and partying, that's Venus as hell. It's like this whole fucking dream is totally Venus. And so it comes up and like, this was a Venus dream. It's like, and I was at a reunion with my other half. I'm reuniting with my other half. And it all had to do with kind of the personality or persona that I was kind of known for in this place where I had lived. And, so all of this stuff starts crashing down. And it makes me think, I'm like, wait a second, it's a Venus dream. I'm listening to "I Feel Love." What hour is it? And I look, and it's the Venus hour. So she wanted me, I have other fun stories like this, but she wanted me to talk about this one. I don't know exactly why you wanted, what specifically about this one.
I love all of the interactivity and the confusion. It reminded me of a Shakespeare play where they have twins that interact or disappear and create different plot lines. And so it's as though you're following some plot lines and you're heading back toward Venus, heading back toward union. And an unusual way, because it's not usual for you to be aligned with a woman necessarily, not on Earth, but divinely. And this is an astrological dream. That's why I wanted it. Divinely, we are paired perhaps as the evangelicals might say, because that's the soul level. But when we get down to the detail, our biology, it may have a moment of conflict there. But I think that
Chris, I don't think it's Merchant of Venice. I don't think it's Merchant of Venice. Isn't it All's Well That Ends Well? Or he put Merchant of Venice. I don't think it is, because that's the one with Shylock the Jew and the pound of flesh. That's not the one with the twins.
They start out shipwrecked, I think. The first scene is a shipwreck. I'm thinking it's Much Ado. Much Ado might have yeah, and then there's a couple of them. And you know, for that we give to Shakespeare kind of a Gemini quality as a writer, because he's so in and out. You know, first you see it, and now you don't. The disappearing twin is kind of a theme. But anyway, union and the return to union is a wonderful theme. It's as though something integrated in your life.
Well, let's hope so. It hasn't happened yet. I was telling her that, you know, obviously, especially with the pandemic, but pretty much since I left San Francisco in 2003, I've kind of left that persona as well. So I haven't really been very kind of in that persona. Maybe 2008, I left the second time. And that's probably when I really kind of left that persona fully behind. And so, to kind of think about that, and to think about, you know, just all of the revelry and the ribald revelry of that time period. And of course, Claire-France Perez was kind of on the outskirts of that, because we've been friends for a really long time. And I met her when I lived in California. So, so that's all of that is, you know, just kind of an interesting thing. So I don't know why she won. That's why we started with that. Oh, one of the things to think about, I guess, with this is about one of the things that I say a lot, which is that you're always surrounded. The astrological significations are everywhere. And part of becoming an astrologist is kind of learning how to see them everywhere. Actually, Davik had a little interesting experience. Davik, do you want to talk about Davik is doing something called Planetary Charity right now. And why don't you talk to them a little about what that is and what your experience was on Friday?
Yeah, sure. So I did my Orphic hymn at the beginning of Venus's hour on her day, lit the rose incense, put some copper in front of Venus de Milo. Then I went walking, not knowing what I was really looking for. And Venus is currently in Aquarius, and she had just ingressed into Aquarius on Friday. Not just, but she'd been in Aquarius for about 5-6 degrees. And I'm walking through this park, and I walk past this group of 5 girls that are all just hanging out. And it occurs to me once I walk past them that's Venus in Aquarius. That's Venus as a group of friends. So I turn around and I offer them, because I've been carrying the copper balls with me, the 7 copper pieces of copper with me, and I offer them to them, and they take them. And that was the charity that I was able to succeed in.
What is Planetary Charity, Davik? You know, talk to them a little bit about what you were actually doing. What was it what is kind of the basis of that, the foundation of that thing that you were involved with?
So planetary charity is a prerequisite technique used to mollify debilitated by essential dignity placements in the natal chart. So before you would cast a talisman for, say, a messed up Jupiter in Capricorn, you would want to propitiate that Jupiter by giving things of Jupiter's signification to people or things that are signified by Jupiter on his hour, on his day. And that is supposed to soften the blow, I guess, of Jupiter being so detrimented. For me, it's Venus in Scorpio is my detrimented placement that I'm working with. So that's what I was going for, is I was trying to propitiate Venus.
Okay, so what he's talking about is a form of remediation with what's going on in your chart. This is something that we don't see very much in Western astrology, but we see quite a bit with Hindu Vedic astrology. There's all sorts of different methods for remediation. he used a term called essential dignity, and if you don't know what that means, that essentially means, essentially, that means that the planet is it's in a sign where it is either strengthened or where it is weakened. So a planet is strong in a sign that it owns, like Venus rules Libra and Taurus, and so she's essentially dignified in those two signs. She would also be exalted in Pisces, so she would be dignified in that sign. In the opposite of those signs, she would be detrimented. So Libra, I'm sorry, not Libra, Aries and Scorpio are the detriments of Venus, and the fall of Venus, because the opposite of fall, of exaltation is fall, is Virgo. So this is what he's talking about. So if you yourself have any of these planets making offerings, psalmic orphics, exactly, Chris.
Yes.
Exactly.
So at the start of Venus's hour, what I did was I lit some incense that is scented rose, because Venus rules rose, and I chanted the Orphic hymn. Yeah. And that's like opening the door, that's communicating directly to her. That's saying, hey, I'm over here. Look at me.
Exactly. And so the copper, that's a metal that she rules. The number 7. So just to kind of clarify further, he had 7 copper balls. So he used 7 copper element metal things. So he was basically kind of using as much of her signification as possible. Welcome, Judith.
And it's important to know that essential dignity, first of all, it encompasses 5 things. It's domicile, exaltation, triplicity, term, and face. So it's nothing like being squared off by a malefic. It's nothing like combustion, nothing accidental like being in the 12th house. It all has to do with the sign and the part of the sign that it's in. And it's also important to remember that dignified is to be interpreted as a word literally, like a planet is dignified. Venus is dignified, not so much strong, but carries herself with dignity when in her domicile. Whereas she would misbehave in Scorpio, Aries, and Virgo, which she does.
She'd be very undignified. Yeah, so she might be act in an undignified manner, which could bring scandal, right? And so that's an aspect of Venus, right? Is she scandalous or is she under control?
Stuff like that.
Great supplier. Oh, wait, someone said they have a supplier for Solomonic Venus oil. Who's that? Is this Chris? Still Chris, okay.
Sounds useful.
Any other planets, Chris, do you have for Mercury by any chance? Because my Mercury's in Sagittarius and I'm doing for him. And if you want, maybe later on, I'll tell you my Mercury story, my Mercury and Aquarius story, because I'm living in a very interesting place. Claire-France, do you want to bring us back? Oh, he has all in the instances too.
That Mercury and Aquarius story is pretty awesome.
All right, so
okay. If anything.
All right, so I have Mercury and Sagittarius on my ascendant, and opposing Jupiter. So Jupiter is in Gemini, Mercury is in Sagittarius, and so they are in each other's. They're both detrimented, and so they're both, this weird detriment thing, which means that whatever, who knows what it means, but it certainly means that life is never boring. So I decided, and I also decided that, Mercury is the ruler of my part of fortune. So I really wanted to get Mercury and Aquarius. I really wanted to get kind of into this Mercury. I'm in a new place. I'm living in a new place. I've been here for about 4 months. And one of the things about the place where I'm living is that I'm living in a place called Tulum, Mexico. And Tulum, Mexico just happens to have all of the names of thank you. Oh, Layla, excellent. Okay, so it just happens to have all of the names of the zodiac, the stars, etc., are all the street names. So right now I live on Gemini Street. I live on Calle Géminis. And just down the road from me, the next block over is Satellite Street. And then the next over from that is Centauro, which means centaur. And Centauro and Sagittario actually intersect each other. So one of the things about this place is that it wasn't designed astrologically. So there aren't very many places where a planet and a zodiac sign intersect. There are not very many. So mostly there are parallel streets. but there are a few. And so I decided to do on a Wednesday because Wednesday is the day for Mercury. So if any of you want to kind of know some of these things, what are the Mercury days? What are the Mercury, what are the what's the word I'm looking for? Metals and things, all of these kind of significations that have nothing to really do with self, but have to do specifically with planetary significations. Either leave information for us to be able to get back with you, and we'll try to kind of lead you towards some of those resources. But as a result, there just happens to be one for Mercury and Aquarius. And on this day, on Wednesday, which is Mercury Day, when I was going to do mixed alloys, absolutely. And so we're going to get to this whole mixed thing with Mercury in a second. So when we get to, I do my little thing, and what I've decided is I'm going to do it the Mercury way. I'm going to write it and speak it. So I don't have anything, I'm not going to burn anything. I'm going to basically just write out the Orphic hymn as I speak it. So that's going to be my full commitment to the ritual. So that's how I start. I write it out. That takes almost 10, 15 minutes. And finally, I decide what I'm going to do is to go to Mercury and Aquarius, to the intersection of Mercury and Aquarius. There just happens to be a Mercury and Aquarius, and Mercury was in Aquarius. So I walked down to Mercury and Aquarius. I had looked at a chart for the time, and Mercury was right on the IC. And so I decided, even though I was going to the southwest, what I would do is I would get there and I would sit facing north, or I would stand facing north. I get down there, I don't really see anything, but there's this little kind of little park area where people can sit, and I'm like, oh, that's nice. I end up kind of walking up Mercury Street and then kind of down. I don't really see anything. I sit down, I face north, and I look over to my left, which I guess would be to my west, and there's this, and of course, Aquarius is a Western sign. I didn't even think about that, CF. Aquarius is a Western sign. I look over to my left, to the west, and there's this homeless guy. Now I live in a kind of a touristy environment. So it's kind of beach town, touristy environment. There really aren't any homeless guy, but this guy reeks of homelessness. He's skinny. He's got the scraggly beard that's really long. He looks like an old guy, but then on second thought, he looks like this really young guy. And so already he's this mix of young and old. And so I'm thinking, oh, but that couldn't possibly be Mercury. I keep looking to my north. So this guy sees me, and he immediately starts doing these push-ups, these really difficult push-ups between the floor and this pole and whatever. It's he's really kind of showing off there. And I'm like, okay, whatever's going on there. And I'm still looking north for my Mercury. Where the hell is my Mercury? It's going to come from the north. So then he moves in front of me. And everything about him was mixed. Everything about him is mixed. He looks like he could be young. He looks like he's old. He looks like he's homeless, except he keeps going inside this gate to get things and bring them out. He's got a bag on the ground. He's acting all crazy and homeless, but yet he goes into this gate and goes in and gets something and comes back out. And it's like, oh, wait, so he's got a place to go, but he doesn't. There's more of this word mixture thing. Then he comes up again in front of me, and one sock is on and one sock is off. I'm like, damn. I'm like, is this my Mercury? And so he's like, oh, you ever seen a UFC guy? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, whatever. And he starts doing this run where he runs up onto the table and runs back down, runs up the table, runs down. He does that for the next 2 minutes. He's just running up and down this table. and I'm like, okay, they say crazy people. And then, of course, he looks Mexican, but he speaks perfect English. That's the other thing. So all of these things about him, he looks old, but he looks young. He looks homeless, but he's got a place to go. He's got one sock on, he's got one sock off. He looks like he's Mexican, but he actually speaks perfect English. And then he even blessed me. And I thought, oh, Jesus, okay, this is obviously my Mercury. And he's a complete weirdo. And he's a complete weirdo. And so part of this weirdo thing, of course, is, Mercury is kind of, common to all things, right? Mercury is common. That's what he's called. And so he's common to the good, common to the bad, and common to everything. So obviously at some point, I leave and I realize it's not until I tell Davik later that day that I'm, oh, by the way, this is what happened. And then it seems like it's really obvious that the Mercury did show himself. So none of this, these things that we're talking about have anything to do specifically with 2021, particularly at this particular point. But they are kind of fun, cool stories about being able to see the astrology all around you and everywhere.
Exactly. And the other part of that, having heard the story for the second time, fascinating that he is in the nadir, that Mercury is in the nadir, which is the lowest part of the chart. And so we find a man in the lowest part of his own personal cycle. Maybe we could say that homelessness or the appearance thereof would be at a nadir of his life, so to speak.
That's a very good point.
Interesting, so it bleeds through everything. It bleeds through. And so what we're talking about all this time is walking through it magically. And so I have a story also. Once I don't just used to, if I want to have a social life, for about 20 or 25 years now, I've been looking up the location of Venus to make sure I get a conjunction. Nothing else will work. Not an opposition, not a trine, not a square. Well, squares work pretty well, but we want a conjunction of Venus on a personal, like Sun, Mercury, Mars. We want that if we want to go out and socialize. That's my new rule for a long time now. That's my old rule, I suppose. So on one night, I had Venus on my Mars. And I have a pretty good Mars. And so I thought, well, that would be lucky. And a friend of mine said, I'd like to introduce you to someone. Great. So I go. And it's a big, giant house. Oh, my God. The guy is a partner in one of the big trading firms in New York. So we're talking $17 million property with views of Sausalito Bay, etc. So the idea is I show up at this party and they think, since I'm a guest of their friend, they never even ask me any questions. I just walk in and I start talking to the lady who greets me, and there's fabulous art, which I happen to be studying this particular phase of art for no reason. I just happen to know that's Duc de l'Orange, and I can tell her it's 1580, and she probably got it from the Museum of Lyon because that's where they sell. She says, yes, the Lyon. So we got excited and we went through and we're viewing many other pieces in the house, and I happen to know this stuff. So, I mean, she thought I was really smart for some reason. Anyway, then they introduced me to my proposed date, and he was the chef for the evening. And I walked in with 2 bottles, and they happened to be painted, or, the decorating of the bottle were copper and dark green. It was beautiful design. And it was the winery where I had been working, and that's where I met this woman. So I brought in the 2 bottles of Bartholomew Park. I put them down in a matching kitchen. They had copper countertops. It was dark green. It looked like I should photograph it in there. I'm all very interested in meeting everyone. I'm introduced to this chef. He looks me up and down, and it was over from the beginning. I thought, you know what? Venus is still in my chart, asshole.
How long ago was this?
This was like 15 years ago. So I walk out of the kitchen, and I'm going to go enjoy the other guests. And I meet my friend Michael. I didn't know Michael. Michael is there with a really sexy lady, very pretty. So I knew he had a date that I couldn't compete with. It wasn't like I was going to have a new boyfriend. And I thought, how interesting. There's nobody else that qualifies for the Venus conversation. I didn't know. Anyway, so the hostess sat us together. And then we all sit down for dinner. And then the hostess finally realizes she doesn't know anything about me. And she says, I forgot to ask you, what do you do? So, I thought maybe I should skip a beat, let someone else answer, but I let it hang in the air for a moment. She had her fork in her, about ready to eat something like this. And I said, I'm an astrologer, and their food fell off of their forks. And the man says, I thought you were intelligent. And I just didn't. I knew I had Venus in my chart working awesome. So all I did was sort of take a breath and look around. And then my friend Michael starts talking. He says, don't you know about quantum physics? And lays it out for his friend, the host. that I have credibility and validity in this conversation, and don't underestimate the astrologer. So I knew I had a new ally. A few days later, we meet. He says, can I have another baby? And then that's when I knew that wasn't a boyfriend. It was a client. Anyway, he's been a longtime friend, and I predicted for him his pregnancies. And that's another story, but maybe that's to be reserved for another time. I'm wondering, how is everyone doing? I want everyone to unmute themselves and introduce themselves. I'm going to ask to unmute if there's anybody here who has not been able to participate in our conversation yet. I'm just trying to get our, so we have Chris, Layla, and Judith. And so the request has gone out. Anyway, we could tell stories about how the planets interact all damn day long. What the other part of this meeting is about is how to begin your study of astrology. And so,
Wait, you had said you were going to talk about the Mercury retrograde.
Oh, that's right. We had Mercury going retrograde at the end of January. I think it was the 30th. I have my ephemeris here.
Yeah, it's the 30th.
It was on the 30th, and it was at 26 degrees of Aquarius, which is where I have the north node of the moon, and it's in my 9th house. So I start my astrology classes on the Mercury retrograde, of course. Anyway, that's just how it works for me. I always start things on a Mercury retrograde. For me, Mercury retrograde is really an opportunity to go back and do it over again. So if you want to do something twice, go ahead. Sign your real estate. Here, I got 2 real estate stories for Mercury retrograde. A person is buying a house in Las Vegas, and this is about 20, 25 years ago. And she has to sign, it's just before Christmas, she has to sign the documents during Mercury's retrograde, and she's panicked. She calls me. I said, look, the only thing you can do is just plan on how you want to come back. How do you want to come back to this position? You're going to have to come back, Mercury's retrograde. So the way that you come back with a house sale is that you have every damn document that shows up anywhere on any part, any inch of the property. If somebody drops a piece of newspaper on your front lawn, goes in the bag. You collect a whole shopping bag or whatever will contain everything that came in the house. And you don't let anything go. I don't care if it's matches, a tomato soup can, I don't give a shit. You collect everything, put it in an evidence bag and store it away. So my friend did that. And one day, about 9 months into living in her brand new home, it's a new construction in Las Vegas, she wakes up obviously panicked because of an explosion in her house. And she doesn't know what to do. Obviously, she has to call the police. But when everything settled, maybe 10 minutes after she got out of her fright, she was able to at least turn on lights. So the house wasn't that badly damaged. And the cops came, and pretty soon she was downstairs. And what we discover is that the shower pan, and that's what I had told her. I said, look, the Mercury was in Scorpio. I said, this is about a leak or water that it collects under the house or something. It goes to the street, maybe. I didn't know where the water was going to collect, but make sure you have everything in order the way I've described. Anyway, so what had happened is the shower pan had been constructed incorrectly and collected a lot of water and fell down into the kitchen. So that meant $40,000 worth of work for repairing. And what happened is she went through the bag that she preserved and found the brochure of the builder who guaranteed that they would guarantee their construction. But that doesn't appear in her real estate contract, that the guarantee of the construction. It was just a bullshit line in a brochure. But she took it to court, and because it was in his brochure, the judge said, yeah, you pay the 40. And she got her judgment because she had that evidence.
Wow.
Okay. So a second story, same thing. This is my best friend, Renee. She buys a house, same panic. She's going to sign. It's Mercury retrograde. I say to her, collect everything. 10 years later, she's needing to sell the house. And she says, you have no idea. She says, what happened next? The guy finding out that she had put her house on up for sale, maybe 48 hours later, it wasn't long, that she got a notice of a lawsuit coming from her neighbor to the rear. Now, if you understand Hollywood Hills, if you know what the Hollywood Hills looks like, it's hills. Some of them are, right? It's hills. You live on hills. You got privacy because of trees, and beneath you, you can't see your neighbors because of trees, and above you, you can't see your neighbors because of cliff and that sort of thing. So it's just very rural looking and feeling. But behind my friend's house is a vertical, the property goes up vertically. You can't even weed it. It's just scrub that goes up vertically to the house that's maybe a quarter mile away, but still it's property lines. And the lawsuit is that my friends have changed the border line between the two homes, which is on this cliff I'm telling you about. So she's all like, what the fuck? And I reminded her, she went, that's right. She forgot, and she went and found it. And in it was a business card from someone who'd visited the house, a real estate agent, who said, if you ever, on the back of the card, it says, if you ever have any trouble with your neighbor to the rear, please contact me. So she calls, and weeks later, what the outcome is that this guy is the city or the county clerk for the county of Los Angeles, the neighbor. He has done this before. The real estate agent been through it. And because of his advantageous position as the county clerk, he can make anything happen on paper, which is the borderline, and Mercury, of course. And she had that note, contacted the real estate agent, went after the guy with an attorney, and that guy got yanked out of his position and served 10 years in prison.
Wow. So it sounds like what you're saying is that an aspect of the Mercury retrograde is about getting all of the administrative details, collecting all of the administrative details for when Mercury goes direct to the place where it was. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's it's a little bit more ceremonious than that. It doesn't have to do with the zodiac. It just has to do with how you walk through the experience. So that when you're buying the house under that situation, what you have to do is plan that you're going to come back again. You're going to revisit this document. This document is being signed right now, but it's not over yet. It is not a permanent forever. There's going to be an issue that comes up. You be ready for it. No, the real reason that you are ready for it is because you did not edit out anything and say, oh, this is probably trash. No, she kept the brochure. Usually those things aren't important.
Right, but because of the Mercury retrograde, you're going to revisit it. This isn't the last you've heard of it.
No.
In other words.
That's right.
Interesting.
So that's what it depends. So that's how you prepare. You prepare for the Mercury retrograde.
So what do you think then in a natal chart, what's the difference between when it happens transit-wise? What do you think is what happens in a natal chart when a person actually has Mercury retrograde? I mean, I know that this is not specific to 2021, but I've always, but I wonder myself.
Well, it's all kinds of either having to repeat. Somebody might have a stutter, for instance. So it's a way of brain and oral connection is it's in a loop. So there's a loop. You look for it as an astrologer. You say, oh well, Mercury's retrograde. Where's the loop? Where's the loop? And so, do you ever repeating anything? Do you ever? So, like for instance, I'm wondering if Randy Rainbow happens to have a Mercury retrograde. You know who Randy Rainbow is? The great artist.
Absolutely.
On
yeah.
his genius is incredible, but it could be out of a Mercury retrograde because he repeats and repeats and repeats him. So he's up there 12 times, doing the sing-songy thing. And so that's sort of a Mercury retrograde repetition to me, the chorus line that he makes out of himself. He's 12 characters in a chorus line. He's wonderful. So great creativity that takes advantage of, let's say, a disadvantage, which is I have to repeat myself. Well, no, write a song and then you can repeat yourself. So there is.
Yes.
So this is how to, basically we have to house ourselves correctly for the Mercury retrograde or for whatever conditions that are in the chart. We talked about it the other day. You said some charts are just shit charts. How do you handle that? Well, if we don't need to just rely on the stars. What we must rely on is human capacity, human dignity, and human urge to continue. So the humanity of the situation is that we have advantages that the planets don't have. What we do as human beings is we have humor, we have humility, and we have humanity to protect us. And each of us are equipped with a certain amount of it. Those are three words that I call hum words. They all start with HUM and they all are wet. That's Venus. So the hum words are part of how to create a human experience out of a shit chart, which is you get up in the morning, you go to work every day, and you do consistency, which is something the planets can't do. The planets can never be consistent. They're wanderers. They're wanderers. The planets aren't going to be consistent. Humanity is going to be consistent. Humanity is going to pay the mortgage for 35 years. That's what is human and dignified for each person. So what the chart represents for them is the labor of being human and the dignity of it. So it's not a shit chart. It's not a shit chart if we can dignify humanity.
If the person can dignify themselves. You recently did something, or I think you might have done a video, or you did a video series on empty houses, but you also did a video thing on the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the Great Conjunction. Would you like to talk a little bit about that? I didn't do it in a video. It's a big long article and that's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's on Reddit. Would you bring out some of the points from that article that kind of also come into right now?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we come into a year. Actually, we spent a year last year with Jupiter in Capricorn, which is a shit chart. As you were saying about Jupiter in Capricorn. Nice to meet you, Davik, by the way. Anyway, let's see. I'm going to look this up. It's all right. So Aquarius first. What is Aquarius? Aquarius is the sign of water bearer. But the water bearer has a special kind of water. His liquid, the thing that he pours, is not wet. It's not wet. So it's an air sign. So what is he pouring? It is the advent of social networks, the advent of groups online, the advent of, and I've been seeing this happen for about 150 years. Now let's go and talk about the age of Aquarius for 1 minute. Age of Aquarius is a calculation that requires a 72-year span per degree. So if we started with the Reformation of the Catholic Church during the 1800s, which is where I'd like to start the age of Aquarius, which is when women started asking for, instead of the Trinity to pray to, we should have a quaternity, which would include another female figure, Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene was finally sainted in 1967 or 8, something like that.
Probably during Vatican II. So
Vatican II, exactly. It was a result of Vatican II. So Vatican I launched it, and then almost 100 years later, second phase, they didn't want to put Mary Magdalene into the quaternity. They didn't want to change the Trinity. They sainted her instead. But they also had, and you're an expert, Antoine, on the popes. So here I am trying to compete with you, but the Pope there made Mary Magdalene, that was Pope John Paul, I believe it was, that made Mary Magdalene a saint. Now, that's only 1700 years late in this game, and one of the first females, you know. So this is the entry of women into the larger discussion about how we should organize ourselves. That was mostly centered around the church. Now we're into degree 3 of the Aquarian age, not just 0. This is not just the beginning, because we've been looking for liberation a long way. You know, Black people in the United States have been looking for it for 450 years, 8 minutes and 45 seconds. So it's a long way to get out of an age and change the age so that we all become allies. It's so interesting that in the age of Aquarius, we find our allies. So this is a whole new concept socially that hadn't been around in, I guess, in white America, at least. I don't know exactly. Since I'm not Black, I have to ask someone else. How long have you had allies? But the idea is that we are now appearing in public as allies to the rest of our citizenry. And so this is part of the social changes. We were talking about it. I think it was Layla, wasn't it? If you want to get your microphone on, you could tell me. I believe she was.
Or you can put it in the chat. Or you can put it in the chat, Layla, if you're more comfortable with that.
Okay, yeah. Write it into the chat. But so let's see.
What do you think about the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, like the differences between the two energies as well? So the Saturn and the Jupiter.
Right. Well, the combination of the Saturn and Jupiter are, I said it on Reddit the other day, are commercial, which is a combination of mercurial things, MERC appearing in commercial. So let's put the planets where they belong, which is in co-Mercury. And so when you pull Jupiter-Saturn conjunction together, you can, well, in social settings, what it means is a change of management under new management, which was a cartoon with the White House, right? Under new management. Mm-hmm. So you know, we are able as a population to create allies and to unionize. And there's an amazing story in the Atlantic as to how this election was protected by people. People are different than the planets, and people can organize themselves outside of the energy of the planets. They can do what humans can do. They can't necessarily do it with the help of the planets, but they can do it anyway. Back to the Aquarian story then. So the water which is not wet is what we're doing right now. We're sharing stories. We're sharing consciousness. Consciousness is not wet, but it can be poured. It can be liquefied and poured out. So that's what we're doing in this presentation. We're pouring consciousness. And so when you have the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction, then you have a whole new level of consciousness coming aboard. And what that means to us today is that we found out how many voted. And that qualifies basically our score for the moment on how well we're doing in an Aquarian reorganization of our lives. So under new management occurring during the pandemic suggests to me that many people will not be going to the back to the old job. Many people will not be returning to what I think of as a life of slavery, which is to be stuck in a job where you are essential, so essential that you cannot leave even if your life is in danger. That's weird. That's slavery. So when your life is in danger, you should have the privilege of not being subjected to that environment that might kill you. But under the age of Pisces, that's been exactly the order of things. And all of the neurosis that goes along with, what's the word, gaslighting. Gaslighting is a perfectly age of Pisces terminology describing how the Caesars would mollify their audiences. They had much better latitude because there were very few records of what they said. But today we have much more latitude because we remember what people said. We have record. Anyway, Jupiter and Saturn then can be for instance, in a chart of a friend of mine, she was talking about having a love affair in addition to her very busy family life. But then the Jupiter Saturn came along and conjoined her moon. And what happened is she had to change how she treats her family. And that meant that she can't have the love affair under new management. She didn't have to tell her husband, never found out. I mean, it wasn't like that, you know how the story goes, but she had to change her life. She had to return to her motherhood. Motherhood beckoned under new management, her family, since moon is the mother.
I want to talk a little bit about Aquarius a little differently because I remember when I first came to classical astrology and understood that Uranus was not the ruler of Aquarius and that Aquarius was a fixed air sign, and how much that had kind of impressed itself upon me. And so one of the things that I realized about, and Saturn is exalted in Libra.
Yeah. And
so I really put a lot of onus on Saturn, as Saturn in Libra, as etiquette, diplomacy, and civic behavior, civil behavior, civics, how we approach our society, how we agree.
Yeah.
On what kind of ideas on which we agree as a society on how to be in connection with each other, right? So Gemini kind of connection is gossip and talk and the gossip fence, giving the information back and forth. Libra kind of information is what happens intimately between two, how we unload to each other. As we complete each other in our relationship. But the Aquarian type of relationship is where we all see ourselves as part of this thing, and we all agree on what shall we all agree is how we will do these things. And of course,
I was going to say, being that the water that we're talking about is not wet, being that it's consciousness, what we begin to realize is that we operate in the flow of waves. It's waves that we're flowing through. And when we catch a wave as a surfer, we can make it all the way to the beach and it's 5 miles long and it's fabulous. But a lot of times we swim out. We have a shit chart. We have to swim back. That's a shit chart. You have to do all the work.
So my point then next, because you were just talking about this thing that's not wet. One of the things that's different about how Vedic astrology deals with the sign of Aquarius is they call it kumbha. And kumbha is essentially, it's the pot itself. It's the container itself. So it's not about what's being poured, it's about what's actually containing what it is that, and there's the Saturn aspect of it, right? Because Saturn is what gives us the form, right? So it's actually the kumbh, it's the kumbh itself that is what's important. And so there's that part of it, like, what you're talking about, what isn't wet, but it's not so much even about what's poured out, but out of what's the nature of the kumbh that it's being pouring out. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is propaganda and misinformation and disinformation in this particular age. And especially, and of course, information is an air sign related thing. And then so is disinformation or propaganda or misinformation. When I think one of the signs of Saturn is corruption. Saturn corrupts what it touches. And so it's, as a result, that can, and also Jupiter is truth. So here is Saturn corrupting the truth, right? And so you may have actually even heard of this particular type of time period as post-truth. So right, so we're in a post-truth environment, and so that's kind of, in my opinion, part of what this Saturn Jupiter is creating, either going back to an era of of more truth, or creating more of this kind of propaganda. I mean, even the concept of propaganda, the ultimate aim of propaganda is control, right?
Yeah.
And that's a Saturn thing as well.
Yeah, well, we can say
Fact checks more than ever, divine.
what that I think we can say is that is the motivation. However, there's a lot more people talking than just leadership. So leadership is motivated, like you have expressed. They'd like to contain it. They'd like to, manage it, whatever. When you're talking about the misinformation, we're talking about, now I have to use the extra Saturnian planets, the Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, to signify Neptune's role in all of this. And Neptune has been squaring the Neptune in the United States chart now for a year and a half or so. So this is the cesspool of misinformation. It's the ideal that leads to the drain hole. It's like QAnon is, they say he's the patriot without naming who he is. We expect it to be a god like Donald Trump, but without naming it, what they supply is a bit of carnival, calling, like, come over here and see the bearded lady, or come over here and see the QAnon, or come over here. It's a bit of a holiday barking, a carnival barking, to get a crowd going. So I think it's a Neptune event when everything is going in a sort of a smashed together lie that we've been seeing, the lies, and especially about immunology and et cetera, about the pandemic. It's been difficult. But
what do you think where do you think the year is going, as far as so in this context, where do you think the year is going?
Well, it's going to hell. But that's only if we let the planets do it for us. We can't let anything do anything for us. Again, we as human beings will always have a collective shit chart, because we're not absolutely in control until we get there, until citizens have control of how their country works. We have a lot of work to do. So that is the humanity, the sweat, the consistency that we have to pour in to correct everything that is being done by the gods, because they laugh at us. They laugh. This is entertainment to the gods. And we are representing consciousness. We represent consciousness, which means this hurts. I don't like it. That's consciousness. So if it hurts and I don't like it, I have to get out of my bed and go labor against it. And I have to use my own sweat.
Does that mean that this is an era of, or rather, does that imply that this is then an era of more engagement, of more civic engagement?
Well, yes.
Do you think that's a necessity, or that's a requirement then for this age, for this particular time and this year especially, of engagement?
Because we are nourishing ourselves from the water, which is not wet. We're nourishing ourselves from a similar source. It's just that what we do with it is either to hurt each other or to support each other. And that's really the bottom line. Like, for instance, you have senators from Virginia and Arizona who want to block the rescue plan that Joe Biden has brought to the table. So two people are trying to block it. We have to go out there in those cities and stand up. So we need people to stand up physically, human bodies to stand up. So to get what we need in order to survive from this, I won't call the government any names anymore, but yeah, we have to labor against our shit chart, our shit government.
And we have to labor against our own apathy. I think so. Maybe that's another aspect of this for me, is that people are often asking about having Saturn and Jupiter together in a house, and there's an energizing that Jupiter does to Saturn, where there's a draining that Saturn does to Jupiter. And so there's this balance that has to be struck of activation. There's an activation balance that has to be struck as far as participation civically, in my opinion, as a result.
Exactly. But a lot of the Jupiter Saturn is very often seen, the machine of Jupiter and Saturn is seen in business. So you have buy low, sell high, you know. So who is buying of low would be Saturn, sell high would be Jupiter. You do it backwards, you go broke. So business is, you know, based on, you know, how you buy and sell, basically. What are you selling? Well, it's the water which is not wet. So how to protect each other is to do the work, do the labor of it. You have to actually do the, people who write have to write, you know, people who walk have to walk. I don't know. Everyone has a job and they have to just complete it for the benefit of others, really. We have to think about.
There's Saturn, and there's Aquarius. So it's basically do your duty, which is Saturn.
But you know, also Shakespeare would say that I would say about Aquarius what Shakespeare said to one of his about one of his deputies. I think it was in Much Ado, and it was a copper who was saying, warning one of his deputies to stay on the windy side of the law, meaning on the side that's kind of obvious, like don't let me see you sneaking around the other side. Stay on the windy side. And we have to remind Aquarius to stay on the windy side. You don't have to remind Capricorn. Capricorn are very conformist with regard to what they think is the law. Now, of course, there are a lot of Capricorn lawbreakers, but that's what they think. But when you have Aquarius, happy birthday. But when you have Aquarius, Aquarian forget that they have to conform to any kind of law, you know, because they're a little bit quirky that way. So you have to remind them to stay on the windy side of the law. But
does anybody have? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were.
Please, no. I'm enjoying our conversation. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, does anybody else have questions?
Yeah.
Because we got Hi, She Sees the Moon. That's one of the people who came from our study. And so, you know, if people have any questions kind of about the information that we're talking about or stuff that they want to kind of clear up, or if there are any people who have placements in the early degrees of Aquarius, you know, I'd love to. I mean, often what you tend to see we see on Reddit, or I tend to be on Reddit, she tends to be on Facebook, but what we tend to see is most people asking what's going to happen. But I would love it if there's somebody who's experiencing, who can tell us what's going on with them. So if anybody is with us who's experiencing early degrees, Aquarius midheaven, somebody just said, yeah, like 2 or 3. Well, let's see. Well, Jupiter is what, at 6 or 7 now. I think Saturn's at 2 or 3. So yeah, so anything within the first decadent, so between 1 and 10.
So unmute yourself. Unmute yourself if you have something to contribute. We want to hear from you. It'd be fun. Let's see, Saturn. Let's see, at the beginning of March, Saturn will be at 8 degrees of Aquarius, and Jupiter will be at 16 at the beginning of March. So that's in a few weeks.
Let's see. Currently transit Saturn is hitting my natal Saturn. That's Layla. And somebody has a Capricorn midheaven. We're looking mostly for the Aquarius because that's going to be the most, that's going to make the most. Now, She Sees the Moon said that she has an Aquarius midheaven. Have the planets transited over that already yet?
Yeah, I can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I do have the Aquarius midheaven. I have just quite a few planets going on there right now.
What's the
degree? 5 degrees. 5 degrees in Aquarius.
Oh yeah. Okay. And so what have you been experiencing?
Yeah, a lot of conversations going on, just in my local environment, and I don't know, stuff I've been seeing online. Just a lot of, just connections I didn't think I would be making on like a deeper, more impactful level. The kind of stuff I've feel like I've been searching for, and then I'm able to finally have these, like conversations and connect with people on just a different level than I've had before.
So a new community.
And what would be the nature of the conversations? Are they kind of around the stuff that we've been talking about, or are they all kinds of other things?
Yeah, it really is all kinds of stuff, but it's has a lot to do with countries, societies, personalities, experiences that make us individuals, and but also belonging to a place, such topics like that.
Right.
Excellent.
You would feel a little bit more accepted by, and so what happens here is I'm gonna put these two planets, the Jupiter and Saturn, because they're in your midheaven. So these are occurring. These transits are occurring in a place, the 10th house. I have often said there's a lady in the balcony if there's Venus there. So it's a balcony position. It's above you. And it's like people can look down to your life, into your life from their position. And it's in those positions that the Jupiter and Saturn are working.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like something
So,
higher than the
let's say
individual.
the admin that suddenly notices you in a group and says, I'd like to hear more from you, or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not really just one individual. It's
Coming from everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's the point I kind of wanted to make about one of the things that stuck out to me about what you said is about how you're able to make connections. But if you're talking about mental, it sounds like mental connections or connecting dots in a way that's different, in a way that's kind of redefining kind of reality for you. And I think that's what this great conjunction, the Saturn Jupiter, is kind of about too, is this big shift. It's not, it is this change in management, but it's, sometimes when it's a change in management, the entire thing reorganizes. It's a reorganization of everything. And so, but then it also feels like there's an element of inclusion involved as well. And so Layla, you're saying that that's happening in the 11th and you've been feeling it as well. I mean, I'm just reading from she's been sending in text while you chat and stuff while you've been saying that. But that's really fascinating. I'm glad that you're feeling it. Once again, one of the things that I tend to notice often is people ask what's going to happen during their transit instead of experiencing the transit and letting us know what happened, because that's how we can often know, what's going to actually happen.
Right.
Oh,
Thank
wait,
you.
Davik. Oh, it was Davik that said mine too. Okay, so it's an entire change. And you were saying, wait, in what area, what aspect did it affect you, Davik? I'm sorry.
So the first thing that happened once the shift happened was all of the friends in my immediate circle went back to whence they came, because I'm 21. We're all college age dudes. They all went back.
Huh.
For better or for worse. They probably shouldn't have gone because of the virus. But what I've noticed is that I'm back to being alone, but I've had this influx of older friends into my life. People, and Jupiter's also there. So it's gurus and mentors. Those are the kinds of things that are coming into my life right now. And it's really stripping away. I'm seriously reconsidering some of the friendships that I had before, things like that.
Mm-hmm. So that's your 11th?
Yeah, so I'm interested. My chart ruler is this Mars in Aquarius way later in the 23rd degree.
Okay.
So what I think actually it's in the 23rd degree. So what I'm interested in is when seeing what happens a couple years down the road once Saturn hits that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well,
so Layla just wrote in, hold on one second before you say that. Layla just wrote in that she just experienced a new friend group too, mostly activists.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And of course, activism and group activism, that's also kind of an 11th house thing. And that's right along with kind of what we were just talking about with this civic participation.
That's all about new rules. That's all about new rules, which is like Aquarius is all about new rules.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Chris, now you said your midheaven is in Capricorn. so I said, oh, yeah, and I was like, oh, wait, we're really looking at Aquarius. But do you feel like the Jupiter Saturn in Aquarius is affecting it? And what can you tell us about when it was in Capricorn? Because that stuff was in Capricorn, just before. So before when that stuff was in Capricorn, how did it affect?
Oh yeah, last year.
That would be last year.
Mhm.
Oh, wait, Layla says, and she originally met this friend group when Saturn entered Aquarius before it retrograded back to Capricorn. So right when it came in. So Chris, you can either unmute yourself or you can write in whichever you feel more comfortable. But I do remember you saying something about your Capricorn midheaven and wanted
It
to
sounds
include
like
you.
you've got a lot of ascendants around Aries here.
Oh, maybe so. Well, let's see, Layla, I think she has it in 11, so that would be Aries ascendant, huh?
Yeah.
And then Chris has the midheaven. Oh, that would be Aries ascendant. That's true. And I think she sees the moon as Leo ascendant, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember.
Yeah,
Oh, wait, no,
have
she's
that
the one
chart,
with the
I'm pretty
Aquarius. Yeah, no, it's Aquarius, but she just said Aquarius midheaven. Arguing online with conspiracy theorists. Did you see that? Chris says he's been arguing online with conspiracy theorists.
It's like my day job at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. So spent most of his time doing that.
Arguing on the internet.
Well, if you need, there's a great subreddit called QAnon Casualties. So for when you're ready to.
Awesome. I think I'll have to go there on Reddit. QAnon.
Yes, on Reddit.
So that's where
Jim
they're
Rising.
talking about coming away from the group.
They're talking about people in their life who are in QAnon. It's actually kind of sad. I mean, a lot of them are really, there a lot of the people writing in are teenagers whose parents have gone QAnon, and whose entire families are involved with it. They can't move out, they can't leave because they're still minors.
Yeah.
But at the same time, everybody around them has gone fucking crazy on this QAnon thing.
And that reminds me, I wanted to talk about the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction as a bad thing, because Saturn is seen as the evil, really, Satan. And Saturn rejoices in Aquarius. So when Jupiter is there working for Saturn, Jupiter's expanding Saturn's capabilities. Everything that Saturn is doing, he's already functioning really well, and he has Jupiter at his behest. So if we think about the old people going nuts, that's Saturn's old people, like our fucking parents going crazy. So that's totally something that could happen.
And Jupiter's inflation, right? So there is a form of kind of narcissistic inflation involved with this. There's also this crusader aspect of it, and so there's, I think of crusading as being kind of more of a Mars Jupiter thing, but there's this crusadership of save the children.
Oh.
And of course, Jupiter is fertility and fecundity and all of that stuff. So there's this whole kind of, save the children thing, and because of the penthouse.
To the most anxiety-producing social event, which is that children are in danger, and everyone feels the same way toward it.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a way of seducing you and saying, "Come on in," because we're all for that. Except that there's nothing going on. So
or rather, it's them themselves. What we just found out was Q was becoming this network for child porn images.
right.
So that's one of the things, and also that one of the main leaders of Q was one of the main people that was doing the porn images. So it was under the guise of, this is what we're working to get rid of, but it was really becoming an underground child porn thing. So there's your Neptune square Neptune again too, if we're talking about the deception. But Saturn, one of the things that because we don't really think in classical terms so much about Saturn any longer, but Saturn represents darkness, right? Both of his signs oppose the signs of the lights.
The furthest away
Leo,
from the sun, or
and the
he's
furthest from
away
the sun.
Earth.
Turns away from the sun, yeah.
That's right. So, and from the earth rather. So as a result, there's this sinister aspect to it. There's this darkness, the corruption, all of those kinds of things.
Saturn
And
corrupts.
so, and so once again, also Jupiter is truth. Jupiter is veracity and truth and goodness, and virtue and goodness. And so here's how Saturn can warp this virtue.
And judgment.
That actually, if I may interject, that it reminds me that there is of course all this sinister stuff around Saturn, but there's a good half of the coin, and it's that with the shift from Earth to air, specifically Saturn going, and Jupiter, more importantly, Jupiter going from his fall into a place where he's not fallen.
Yeah.
He's not as fucked. He's not as fucked. He's still at the behest of Saturn, like I said, but this is the change in leadership that we've been waiting for, where it's all this insane Saturn and Capricorn, like hyper malefic, receptive shit. Like, I'm gonna take all of this because it's feminine, it's receptive.
Don't forget we had Pluto there too. So Pluto is going to
totally
put
putting the
Pluto,
magnifying glass on it. And
well, it's a death aspect as well. And the United States has been going through the Pluto return, and death. We got 500,000 of them all.
And all these people dying, right? Exactly. And also
now,
the death of a regime, right? The death of an idea and a regime.
So on the solstice, we have this shift that finalizes that change from these people are fucking crazy to these people have to do damage control. And that's really how I feel about the coming year, is that instead of Saturn and Capricorn with the knee-jerk reaction to the whole thing, we're starting to build back up what is destroyed.
Yeah. I feel like we're in the situation, whereas just after World War II, where everybody was coming back from all of that and trying to rebuild the country and finding idealism among people. I remember that, people, not everybody had to have two salaries in the household. Everybody had one salary moving in the household and lots of mothers to come home to. So in the 50s, it was a very different tax base, very different attitudes, but I think, trying to move into not so naive of a position, but something more helpful in terms of how we organize and make it work for us. Make it work for us, meaning our sweat is going in. That's our sweat equity we're investing for making sure that this never happens again. But we
Saturn
have to
Aquarius, new rules.
Absolutely. And here's a perfect example of that is there was just a report that was based on 50 years of research on trickle-down economics or supply-side economics or trickle-down theory. And it was after 50 years, nobody tends to benefit except for the very wealthy. And that was the report.
Nobody needed
and it's
any
like, well,
diapers for that much pissing.
Right. And so here's the thing. We all knew that, but all of a sudden, so also many of these sacred cows, right? And so I think of it like in a lot of ways of these sacred cows that we've held, certainly the last 4 years of Trump really kind of brought a lot of these sacred cows to as an aspiring economist, this hurts me in my soul. It hurts you in your soul that trickle-down economics doesn't work, or it hurts you in your soul that it was actually held up as something that worked for so long. Because we saw that it really didn't. We saw that it never really did with the Laffer curve and all that stuff.
But that's because we all went back to sleep and didn't do the hard labor that it requires. In other words, there is no sleeping anymore. That's the new rule. No more sleeping. No more sleeping as a citizen. We have to watch out. We have to be allies, and we have to pin everybody down, all the way. And that's
accountability.
And that's the labor of a shit chart. That's the human labor that's required. And that's the only secret that there is, that astrology does not predict everything. It is
and now
not,
wouldn't Saturn be accountability?
Well, you would think, but you'd need a little bit of Jupiter to bring the law to it, because Saturn is also the aristocrat who can do things by himself. He doesn't need everybody. He's at the top.
On the topic of Jupiter and law, Jupiter is justice. And we're again with the shift from Capricorn to Aquarius, a fallen Jupiter with no justice to Saturn
justice.
ruled Aquarius. Justice exists again. It's coming back.
It's coming
Right,
back.
or at least can be discussed, at least can be discussed.
And so what I'm trying to say here about humanity is that with the help of the gods, a lot more justice comes back, but it doesn't mean that we can take any time off or slack at all.
No, that's been the main lesson. There's Saturn again on, the hard lesson. That's been the main hard lesson of the last 4 years, is that basically as a result of our own apathy, we've allowed our society to be organized in the way that it has been, and in a way that doesn't really benefit us, the regular people. And also allowed ourselves to be, to call people who need help welfare queens or whatever. I mean, all of this way in which we've been kind of trained to look badly upon people of our own class, and to look well and to reify people who are wealthy.
And therefore we buy into the judgment of those, let's say, overlords who say that to save themselves money, obviously.
Exactly.
I just heard a very interesting Republican governor from Virginia talk about, hey, let's go ahead and give out the money. Of course, he's not in the federal government. He can say anything he wants. He's a state governor, not a federal employee. But he says this to bug Joe Manchin, of course. But the idea being, he's saying we can afford, as the government, to overpay out because we're only going to tax anyway to get it back. So we can afford to make a mistake and send out too much money. And so I thought, wow, that's very
First time I've heard that in 50 years. First time I ever heard that. Now, I mean, and here the perfect, the difference is, with the whole COVID response last year, it was really, in my opinion, the culmination of this whole drowned government in a bathtub.
Yeah.
Government is not, if somebody from the government says, I'm here to help, you should run the other way. That's all the stuff that came with Reagan. And so here we are at, a place, 100 years after the last important pandemic. Here we are at this pandemic place, and nothing is happening because all of the people in charge believe that government shouldn't be looked to, shouldn't be looked to do anything.
Yeah, we're not, it's not
exactly.
So there's
Right.
new rules. There's new rules. I like your expression, Davik, and new rules and new rules, new management. Under new
Okay, the part of Bill Maher's show. New rule.
New rules, yes. That's right. So listen, it's been so much fun. It's like 1/4 already, or 20 after. We've been going on and on. I'd like to propose another one of these and keep going if you guys have a little time on Sunday afternoons. But we should end now. And I just want to let people know that I'm going to start my beginning astrology class as soon as the sun goes into Pisces. We're going to be in. So
Nothing's a coincidence, Layla. There is no coincidence.
No, I try to organize my coinkydinks. But anyway, so we'll be looking forward to more such conversations. Antoine, always is a pleasure. And Davik, you and I have many more conversations, I hope, coming up.
We better.
Oh, I hope so. It's so awesome.
Thanks all of you for thanks all of you for showing and sticking with it.
Chris, it's been having you.
So wait, you've got a class. So do you want to talk to them about your class?
Well, yeah, I'm starting a class. It's going to be 10 weeks. It's going to take the beginner in astrology all the way to being able to perform actual good predictions, not am I a Leo with fluffy hair or anything like that. We're going to be able to make predictions in 3 months. That's 10 weeks plus. But the idea is that this course leads you, the beginning student, to the book that Antoine and I wrote, which is called The Astrology of Fortune. In the Astrology of Fortune, the questions can be answered, such as, am I going to be famous? Another might be, shall I or will I ever have children? And other such questions that indicate for the whole life. It's very hard for modern astrology, which is so strapped by its own anyway. So we have an ancient technique called the Astrology of Fortune. That will be the advanced class, and I haven't talked about it yet with my friend Antoine, who wrote the book, but I'm hoping that he will help me teach the advanced class, which will begin perhaps in May. So this is just to preview a couple of instructors, Antoine and myself. We're kind of hooked at the hips because he and I each share the opposite ascendant. I'm at 29 Gemini. He's at what, 27 of Sagittarius. So these are the opposite, which create wonderful partnerships. Anyway, so the invitation is to start the classes in a couple of weeks, and I'll be on video doing more details about what's involved and how to sign up with another video.
And I am a yoga teacher, and I'm starting a yoga class at 9 a.m. on Saturdays Pacific Standard Time. So if you're interested in that, you can also contact me. Most of you might know me as Garth Astro on Reddit, and I'm Garth Astro at garthastro.com. So if you're interested in the yoga class, let me know.
Okay, and if you need my email address, it's my name. It's CF. That's my two initials. At Claire-France Perez, and these are hyphenates, so it's Claire-France-Perez.com, and that's my email, cf@clairefranceperez.com. Anyway, thanks so much, all of you, for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See you next time.
See you next time. Let's see. And